Hello, this is R Rats with Team 4545 League, analyzing the game between ILRE and Rubo. This was played in Team Event 53 in the 6th round, and let's have a look. And actually, this opening was discussed in an earlier video I made between Fledermaus and Passan, and perhaps Rubo saw this and tried out the line that I suggested at some point in that. Okay, we have what we can call a symmetrical English, and generally the next move here is G3. This is probably the best way and most precise way to play this opening as white. And the reason is, I think Rubo plays knight F3. The reason is you want to play G3 just as a general rule to get into this opening is because that will often tend to lead black to copy you. Now, it's true black copies white here, but G3 I think is the better way to do it, because then you're going to go right into a symmetrical English. Now it's true black can play other lines, but this is not the game continuation. It's true black can play other lines, but you're still going to reach the same position. And there's a couple of differences here. Theory says both sides castle, but one possible drawback with castling is that, well, black may castle and then white can go ahead and play d4, right? And then if we go into this line, we reach exactly what we're looking for. I think this is a tremendous opening for white. He shouldn't lose from it. But unfortunately, one of the drawbacks with this move order is that after white castles, it's black who in turn can play d5. And this is not a bad move, and a lot of the things that white likes to do, now black does. Granted, he's a tempo down because he's on the second move, but that's all right. It kind of throws white for a loop. So actually, more precise way to play this is to play d4 in this position, and then after pawn takes and pawn takes, we suddenly find ourselves back in the same position. Okay, so with all that in mind, let's go forward. Now, knight f3, as I say, one of the drawbacks with going with knight f3 is it gives black a few more options, and one of them at this point is actually to play e6 and strive for d5, and it could transpose into a wide variety of openings, including the Queen's Gambit decline Tarrasch defense, and there's other lines too, depending on how white plays this, and they're beyond the scope of this video. But anyway, black continues with a symmetrical position. And see, now this is the position I covered earlier in this video. I pointed out that maybe here the more precise move is to play 6d4 and not allow black to play d5. But he doesn't, and then black doesn't play d5, and then bang, we're back in the main line. Okay, and as I say, this is a position that I'm extremely familiar with, and I pretty much can handle this from either side. I know those strategies to play. The main line is to for black is to play knight takes d4, and I've covered this, and for the sake of argument, I'll just go over it again. Okay. Main line says d6 and queen d3, and generally the way for black to play this is the strategy is to play a6 followed by knight d7 followed by knight c5 followed by rook b8 followed by bishop d7, and then finally followed by b5. Now that's a lot of moves. How many is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 moves. White gets 6 moves of his own. But and often they're moves like e4, bishop d2, b3. There's 3 of them, right? And then maybe rook ac1, rook fd1. There's 5 of them, and that's kind of what happens. And let's put all those together just so you see. I like to to term this fantasy chess. In other words, I just look at one variation, one potential variation. Yeah, of course, there's going to be tangents and offshoots or branches of the tree all the way down the line, but we can't hope to look at everything and discuss everything. It would just make this a 20-hour video. But let's look at the position with those things in mind. Okay, we're going to play these moves and see what happens. Okay, in no particular move order. Okay, so e4. Then I said knight d7. Oh, the queen this queen's under tempo. It's going to have to move. So white gets one less move, but that's all right. Okay, so let's play bishop d2, and then knight c5, and queen e2, and now rook b8, and we'll batten down the hatches on c4 with b3. Now bishop d7, and rook ac1, and now b5. And this is ideally the best strategy for black to employ in this position, and he should be fine. He should have an equal game too. But the problem is, if black doesn't go into this line, he often runs into a great deal of difficulty, and that's what's so powerful about this opening from the white side, that if black doesn't know this strategy, he can be in a lot of trouble. But let's go back and we'll look at the main ideas here. As I said, now black doesn't have to play knight takes d5. I think he can get away with d5 here himself. It's one of the ideas. I don't remember all without stopping to look, and I know in some cases knight g4 is a line too. It has a tempo on this knight. The idea is to swing the black queen over, but white has resources against all these lines. Just kind of showing us what some of the possible variations are. It's up to you to go study them. Now the source material I have for this is probably the best in the world. It's John Watson's book on. It's written in English descriptive notation. English 1 ... pawn to queen bishop 4. In other words, the symmetrical English. It was published about 1981, and his 4-volume set came out 79 to 81, something like that. And then he did rewrite one of them, I know for sure. He actually rewrote this one in algebraic notation, and it's much shorter. His original book has more in it and has a lot of ideas that he recommends. Well, what about this? And I don't know if all of them have been tested or not, but Watson, as I've mentioned before in my video series, lesson series number 3, he's one of the best chess authors of our current time right now, because he injects every book I've seen of his, he injects it with a lot of ideas that need testing. And he specializes in the French defense as black. I know there are a lot of league players that play the French defense and players that play against the French defense. So if you can find his work on the French, it's a must look at. And anyway, I'm done touting John Watson. I'll tout him again another time, I'm sure. But check his work out. He's awesome. He broadcasts on ICC. Pay attention to him. Okay, so back to this position. Black employs a gambit, and this was, I believe, this was offered in the game that I mentioned, Fledermaus-Poisson. I believe it was mentioned there. I can't remember if it was offered, or I think it was offered, or maybe it was declined. I don't remember right now. I'm doing so many of these games. But I did discuss it. If the game didn't go that way, I did discuss it. I think maybe by transposition it reached it. I think maybe what happened was a6, and we kind of got into a variation of it by transposition. Okay, so d6 is a gambit, and black's gambiting a pawn for some for some development, not development. That's a V, not a B. All right. Now there's two ways white can handle this. Number one, he can accept the gambit, and number two, he can decline it. Now, just positionally, what do you think the best way to decline this gambit is? Pause the video. Okay, you've come back. We're looking at declining the gambit. That means you don't take the offered pawn on c6. So strategically, the way to decline this gambit is to play knight c2. And knight c2 is a nice multipurpose move. It keeps an eyeball on b4 and d4, and at some point down the line, this knight is going to transfer to e3 and influence pressure on d5. That's the strategic idea behind it. It also guards this rook down on a1, and I've had games where eventually what happens is white plays b3 and black and e4, and black will go gobble this pawn on e4 with his knight, and then the knight takes back, and the bishop comes down here to a1 and grabs the rook, and then the knight takes it, and white has 2 pieces for the rook and pawn, and the 2 pieces just murder the poor rook in these positions. So like I say, I'm very experienced in this line, and white against a6, as I mentioned, I can't remember if Fledermaus played it or not, but knight c2, just declining the gambit is fine, because eventually black is going to play d6, and he's going to play a6 in the other position too if you decline the gambit, and white just gets this real comfortable position to play, and black's gonna have to have a lot of patience to stay equal in this game. And let me just back up just a little bit. There's one thing I meant to say and I left off when I was talking about the main line of queen takes d4 and queen d6 and queen d3, and I was pointing out the way to play it. What happens, a lot of black players, they take this time, they see this killer bishop down here, and they think they've got to get rid of it. So they may park the bishop on e6, and then meanwhile white goes about his business and completes his development. Well, I guess you got to guard this guy. Okay, maybe back up. They'll play rook b8, and then white starts developing. Okay, and then bishop c8, and then maybe rook ac1 and queen d7 and b3. Meanwhile, white's just building up his standard position in this opening, and black rushes down here and trade off the bishop, and white just says, that's fine, since I've got all these pawns on white squares, I'll just put another pawn on a white square and let you trade it. And that's what happens, and black has taken all this time to trade off that bishop, and look at white's position. He's got nice central control, a nice d5 square for his knight, and a solid game overall. He'll just follow up with f3, solidifying e4, and eventually shoot to open up the d file with a knight trade, and white's going to have the better bishop in this position if you get down to an endgame. And I've won a number of games very easily out of this position, which eventually I'll share them down the line to further elaborate on this the power of the symmetrical English from the white side as well as from the black side. All right, so let's get back to the main game. And I said that this offers a pawn, and I showed the ways to decline the gambit. Now we're going to talk about accepting the gambit. And I did take a peek at Watson's book. I wanted to see what he had to say and when did the opponents leave book. You know, usually I'm one that doesn't know a lot of book. I know the themes of them, but I don't know all the branches and the trees and everything. And I don't want to even attempt to say what's right and wrong, simply because I don't know the lines. Nobody can memorize all that stuff. If you have, you've wasted a lot of your time. You would be a much stronger chess player if you just studied your own games and worked on your own analysis. But anyway, and it would be too time-consuming for me to stop and research everything and try to sort through all this. I'm just trying to make a video, and I can spot the main ideas and get the juices flowing so that you folks can in turn analyze these positions and learn more about them. Okay, so in this position, one thing Watson says is untested. There's two ways to accept the gambit. He said untested is this. And this is where Watson stops his analysis. He just says this is untested. And what's logical here? Queen c7. Now you're on the knight. Then there's a pawn loose. How's white going to handle it? Well, if he plays queen a4, he runs into a pin. So maybe this pawn is going to fall. Maybe that's the reason why it's untested, and Watson made a mistake in his analysis. I'm not trying to prove Watson right or wrong. He just said it's untested. So let's see, what else can White do? Candidate moves. Logical says bring the knight back to d4, but you're just going to give back the pawn, it looks like, and Black's got the bishop pair. So maybe this idea is bad, and I can get interesting here. There's some tricks here. Now knight d5, and the point is if Black takes this bishop or takes the knight, White has this little tricky move here, right? See it? And after Queen takes, White picks up the queen, and he's now a pawn ahead. Black's 2 pawns ahead. Wow. So Black's got to be a little bit careful here. So maybe there is some stuff to this, and if knight takes knight, White can take back with the pawn, and he's anchored that pawn in there. So maybe this is worthwhile for White to pursue. I don't know. You guys need to test it. Okay, you're the ones playing these openings. I don't play this as White or Black anymore. I'm on a new opening. But so that's one way to test the validity of the gambit. The other way is the game continuation, which we're finally getting back to, and here it is. And I did know a player that actually it was if you saw my promotion video, it's on the main page of my website. The player of White it was rated about 2180 or so, and I know he broke masters many times. He would play this as Black, and I saw him do quite well with it. And this is the game continuation. I used to see him do this often, and I can't remember if I've played it myself. I'd have to look. I seem to think I know I've been on one side of it or the other before. I just have to dig through my old games and find it. But we've now reached the mainline position. This is still theory, and Queen A5 is theory. And now Black has some pressure for the pawn sacrificed. Now at this point they're going to break away from book. There's a lot of analysis to this in Watson's book, his original one. There's a lot, and he gives a number of candidate moves. Queen A4 for one is a blunder, and I'll leave it to you guys to try to find out why Queen A4 is a blunder. Okay, or do you want me to show you? Well, I have to look it up because I just looked at it a few minutes ago. Okay, I'm going to show you. Why don't you pause the video and I'll come back and give you the solution. Okay, so let's see. I got the right book out. Okay, page. While you're waiting for me to find it, okay. Might help if I put my glasses on. I could see it better. Okay. So you don't need to pause the video yet. You can listen to me. I'm almost there. Ah, here it is. Okay, I've got the solution. Pause the video again if you haven't solved it. Here it comes. Okay, queen takes, knight takes, and then knight g4, exclam. And what they give as a continuation that this actually occurred, they give c5, Watson gives, and then bishop a6 with an advantage for Black, and this is between Martel and Georgiou. That would be Florin Georgiou, the Hungarian or grandmaster, and that's played in Hastings, 1964-65. That's how old that game is. But here, while I have the book out, I'll check the publication date. First published 1980, John Watson. Okay, so that's how old this book is, and it's a classic, and it's not for sale at any price. Don't ask. All right, but maybe, maybe $500. I don't know. But anyway, seriously, let's revert to the main line. And I won't go into all the analysis. According to Watson, and this is 32 years ago, the best move is Queen C2. But what's happened since then, I don't know. There's a whole lot of chess that's been played for 32 years, so I couldn't tell you. There's also gives some other moves, but I won't go into all of them. But I do know that the move that White played was a novelty, at least according to Watson's book. Now let's take a look at the time. Both sides are moving kind of quick, so it seems to be there's some preparation here. And Rook B1 kind of looks logical in a way, but in some ways it's also slow. He's worried about a little pressure on B2, and we'll see where that goes in just a few minutes. Okay, so now Bishop F5 attempts to exploit the move, but a thematic move in main line where there is no gambit of a pawn. When black plays Bishop F5, white will counter with E4, and that's what he does here, driving the bishop to another square. But now it goes to E6, and it's pressuring on C4. So white still has some pressure to deal with here, and he finds Queen D3, which is a multi-purpose move, but it may have some drawbacks too, because in some positions black can redeploy the knight to D7, and it can threaten to go to either C7 or E5, and each one in turn has some pressure on one of those center white pawns. Okay, so my first candidate move, if I was playing white here, would be Queen E2, but that just avoids a tempo with the knight. Okay, it also helps secure B2 a little bit. So let's see what happened. Okay, so nothing wrong with knight G4. The knight D7 idea offers black an option to go to both C5 and D5, to C5 and E5. Playing knight to G4 only gives the option of going knight to E5. So that kind of tips black's hand as to what he wants to do. If black plays knight D7, white has to prepare for both of those because he doesn't know which one's coming, right? It might lead him to play F4, which white could do in the actual game. White could play F4 just to keep the knight out, but it could also lead him to play other moves like maybe bishop E3. Maybe white figures that well, I'll just go ahead and give up the bishop here if you put your knight on C5, or white might even play bishop F4 and do the same thing. It just seems to me like maybe knight D7 could cause white to have a little more clock time, but then who's to say that white's going to play F4 in this position? I think white does play F4 at some point in the game. Yeah, he does, but I'm trying to remember what point. So it's just a suggestion. It's sometimes when you have good moves, look for a better one. And like I say, I'm not criticizing knight G4 at all. All I'm saying is knight G4 tips black's hand. He's putting the knight on E5 if he can. And if the knight's on D7, it's got two options. That's all I'm saying. And if that can cause your opponent to think more and take time off his clock, that's an advantage to you because time pressure can hit him. Okay. So white answers knight D5, and I'm not entirely convinced that's the right move. It's kind of impulsive. It has a threat, but that's all it has. There's other ways to deal with this position. Okay, what I think is fine for white to play here, and it's thematic, is just simple bishop D2. Okay, I think that's the best move. What's black going to do? Okay. In the game, he does win this pawn. Let's go ahead and show you what happens if he does win it now. Okay. Now there's a tempo on this pawn, right? Okay. But the pawn, may not may not be worth it. White just gets a little bit of nuisance value here with moves like Queen D4. Now Black's got to deal with the checkmate threat, right? That means his knight's going to have to hop back to E5 or F6, and I think F6 is more prudent. And now White has C5, getting rid of the threat on his pawn that he probably couldn't defend. And this game, Black has regained his pawn. This is true, but White has the bishop pair for what it's worth, and Black's activity on the queen side is kind of ground to a halt. There's only one more target left on the queen side, and that's the pawn on B2. And right now it's super overprotected, right? The bishop's on it, the rook's on it, and the queen's on it. And now White is forcing another pawn to be exchanged. What's Black going to do? Take it, play rook D8, and at some point White has threats of rook A1 and come down and gobbling the A7 pawn, and White's got no worse than a draw here. If all the pawns are traded off, they're on one side of the board. But he's the one playing for a win if you get down to a minor piece ending. So what I'm saying is that I think Bishop D2 is more prudent, a much better move here. And I'm not saying Black should take this. He probably can take it and fight for a draw. But he can try other moves. He can try rook FC8. But he's got to be careful here because we've got this little discovery lined up. And that's kind of like the point of all this. So White doesn't play as impulsively. He doesn't just go make a threat. He plays Bishop D2 with an idea of a double threat. The knight D5 theme is seen a lot in symmetrical Englishes. And the point is White's got a double attack on the queen, and this knight on D5 is attacking E7. So let's just, for example, let's discuss this move for a moment and see how does Black deal with it. He can't take on D5 because his queen is loose, so he's going to have to draw back the queen back to D8, and this gives White all the time in the world to consolidate his position with B3. And now the pawns are safe and secure. He's got a nice 2-to-1 majority on the queen side. See, he's anchored in the center. And Black's kind of out of threats, okay? And I think in this, if it got to this line, I do believe that the White has refuted the gambit, okay? So what else can Black do here on Bishop D2? Like as I said, if he takes on C3, he avoids the tricks with knight D5. What else can he do? Well, he could play knight E5, I guess. Now White's got to be careful. You're on C4. What if White plays knight D5 here? Says, okay, you can have my queen, but I'm going to get yours too. Okay, this kind of makes a big difference in a number of variations. It gets very tricky. Fortunately, the bishop's on G2, or Black would have a trick. Queen takes D2, right? So let's just get the obvious out of the way. Let's exchange queens. Now, White has a threat. What's the threat? Knight takes E7 check, and then the D6 pawn will be perpetually weak. So what can Black do about that? Well, he can take on B2, but he's going to give something up to do that. But let's just take a look. Let's take with the rook, okay? And I think it's better for White not to take rooks. Well, maybe it is better. Get him off A2. Let's take it. Okay, now we play knight check and king up. And White's a pawn ahead still. Looks like he's going to lose the pawn on C4, but Black's got a weakness, and that's that pawn on D6. So this could turn out very well in White's favor. White has a number of potential moves here, candidate moves: knight D5, bishop B4, knight C6, even rook B1. Although it's not really threatening the knight, it seems to me that White's okay here. Okay, let's go back. Okay, bishop D2. What was I saying? Knight E5, Now it's saying knight d5. So how's black going to handle that? Okay, well, it doesn't look, unless I missed something, it doesn't look like taking the queen is all that appealing. So we go back to this move, and this has the point that it guards e7. Now white's got to deal with his queen, right? Wherever the queen goes, there's going to be a capture on c4, right? Makes sense to me. So let's see. But one thing is, even after the pawn is captured, let's just think about it for a second. After the pawn is captured, all that's happened is white has given back the pawn that black sacrificed. That's all that's happened. White, well, actually, we're not threatening it anymore. The knight blocks it. So we can come back. I'm thinking you can take it. Man, I'm blind today. Okay, so queen e2. What does black have here? Not sure exactly. He can hit the queen with bishop g4, but white can safely play f3 and follow through with a similar type of situation that I said before. Black can redeploy the knight, maybe. Where do you go? c6, and then you're on b2. Black's threatening to go here with his knight, gain of time, and you're threatening to take on b2, but maybe I missed something here. I'm wondering. No, I was thinking b2 was loose, but it's never loose. So bishop d2 just seems to make sense. I could be missing something here. Black may very well get rid of some of the threats and play queen c5. Now that puts an immediate threat on c4. But once again, I think white has solved his problems here with b3. He's got c3 covered, and c4 is covered. e4 is secure, and white's still a pawn ahead. So it could be that this move refutes the gambit. But here's the culprit. Both sides have just played with the increment, and since rook b1 probably isn't theory, but could be, I don't know. White knew the opening so much, and it's a relatively easy opening to play. When black keeps copying your moves, you develop a piece, and he does the same thing. LG, I'll just keep it up, right? So it's not a very time clock consuming opening. But knight d5 is just simply wrong. It's just too impulsive, and bishop d2 is to be better served. And just to reiterate, what do I always talk about in these games besides moving quick? I talk about development. I talk particularly so often about the queen rook and the queen bishop. Well, white did put his queen rook on b1, but he hasn't developed his bishop. It's just a spectator, and d2, it has just so many dynamic possibilities, but knight d5 is wrong. It's just plain wrong. And now black can safely take his pawn back, and the game probably still is even, but white kind of messes up a little bit. Okay, black has pressure on b2. This is true. Is that really a problem that white should worry about? Well, the worst case scenario is he loses that pawn, and then black has an outside pass pawn. Well, if white can win that pawn back, just imagine both those pawns off the board. The game looks pretty drawish, and white has the advantage of the bishop pair. Certainly, he shouldn't lose this position if the last remaining queenside pawns are taken off. White should not lose this. So, depends, is white playing for a win or is he playing for a draw? Well, looking at the ratings, you could say he's probably wants a win, but wouldn't be disappointed with a draw. Okay? So how does he go about getting it? If I want to draw this position, how do I go about getting that draw? Well, first off, I have to develop my bishop, and I've got to develop it someplace where it does me some good. But right now, any place I do develop it, it's going to expose that pawn on b2. So here, I'm just gonna make a move here, and well, let's develop it where it attacks a pawn. Okay? Now clearly if black trades on b2, white's going to pick up the pawn on e7 in compensation. Let's take a quick look, okay? Rook here. Now how you want to take back, with the queen or with the bishop? If you take with the queen, white, well, you're on f2. White can't play rook b1 here. It's going to drop f2, but he's just going to pick this guy up, right? Okay. Where's the rook going to go? Let's put it behind the passed pawn, because that's where rooks belong, behind passed pawns. And now a5. Okay. White is now a pawn ahead, and he's 2 pawns ahead on the king side, or in the center over to the king side. It seems to me like white has adequate compensation for black having that outside passed pawn, because white has one of his own, and it's ready. And it's ready to roll. And although it's true black controls the queening square nicely, white has resources here. He can play queen a3, and bishop a3, driving that queen out, or getting an exchange and getting ready to push his own pawn. So black can't just react too easily to that threat. He's going to have to stop and deal with that threat. Okay, so how are you going to do it? Rook e8. You could try bishop f6. You could try f6 even, driving the bishop back. But the point is, now white has got his bishop developed, and it's out of harm's way. So now white can play moves like b4. Okay, and it's true black can go about his business and chase that bishop, right? But white has some counterplay. He's threatening. He doesn't mind if he's going for a draw. He doesn't mind giving up this b pawn for this a pawn. So if the moment that black shuts this diagonal off, white will have a rook a1 at his disposal, right? So let's suppose white or black kicks it. Now, one interesting move, and it was one that I was thinking of for a while, is play bishop e3. What good does that do? Well, it does a lot of good. Now, you're giving back the bishop pair, but you're changing a couple things in the equation. You've got an opposite colored bishop position. Now, black's bishop is much better than white, so white has conceded something here. But at the same time, white hasn't conceded something, because he's gotten rid of all the pressure on f2, and he's getting ready to activate his bishop by a different means. And here I'll show you. What's black going to do here? Black to play. Well, he could try a tricky a5 because the pawn is pinned, but what if white just goes by? It's a very, very double-edged position. Maybe black is better here because he controls the queening square. He can get his pawns moving a little quicker, but chances are, with enough moves, white has some resources here. That's up to the players to figure out. But even if white does, or black doesn't try that move, white still has some ideas here. Well, I guess you're going to have to push by because there's too much pressure on b1. I think you have to play here, and it's very double-edged. But chances are white's okay here, but black's got the better of it. So, and that was just based on bishop e3. White doesn't have to play bishop e3. White can do other things. What if he plays bishop d2? Whoops. What if he plays bishop d2? What's this bishop d2 to? Well, it's guarding. It's a defensive piece, but it's guarding b4. It's also cutting off the queen's penetration on the 7th rank, and black can still go about his way. Well, he can't now. He can't because b1 is covered. The queen's not on e3. So black's going to be kind of hard pressed to try to win this. I'm not saying he can't win, but put a rook on the c file. Well, what if white does the same? You know, it's kind of, if you trade, it's just balanced. So there was a path to equality, it seems, and depending on the variations, some sides might have some kind of chances. We saw that both sides had some potential if one side misplayed it. So as I said, bishop g5 was the key move here. Instead, we have f4, which makes absolutely no sense. But white chose it. But what's wrong with it? Okay, let's discuss what's wrong with it. First off, it takes away this perfectly useful move, bishop g5. Okay, that was a perfectly good move that black's going to have to deal with, and it gives white time to get that b pawn out of danger. So it blocks the bishop, it shuts the bishop in, and also opens up a direct line to the white king. Okay? So now black has a moment to penetrate a little deeper into the position, put some pressure on the queen, right? This is good. And white comes up with an interesting choice here, which I think just kind of like he starts on a path of self-destruction. Well, he could he try queen c2 here? Well, he could, but then I guess he's afraid of knight e3. But that was a possibility, as I was saying earlier. You're giving up the bishop for that knight. Okay. And I think white should be okay here. He can play rook f3 and go about his business. And black doesn't have the trick of a pin on the b pawn, so he can't shove a5. And with the idea of pushing by it on a4. But black's a little better here simply because his bishop is better. But white should survive this. Okay, what's he going to play? Rook. I'm suggesting rook f3. And it looks like black's going to have to exchange a rook. What's his only other option? Is there one? Doesn't look like it. I mean, was white afraid of this? I don't understand. How does black continue? He's got a check, but I don't see that going anywhere other than maybe shutting white off the c file, and black has the better bishop. But white's okay here. His one weakness is the pawn on b2, and right now black is not primed to take advantage of it. If you want to play rook b1 instead, with pressure, white can get out of things with well, maybe not. Now the pawn is pinned, so I guess the king can't go to g2. Let's put the king on h1. Now rook b1, and like I say, we get a tempo on the bishop. Well, the bishop can take here, I guess, but now it's pinned. So, well, maybe black's is getting somewhere here. As I said, white was afraid of this, but he probably has resources. I was suggesting rook f3. I guess what we have to do is break the pin. What if we break the pin with queen c1? Okay, black can try bishop d4, and I guess we have to run this way. Now the key. This is the key. If white can hold on to that pawn, he's okay. It was losing at the other line. Rook b8. Now black's very active. What can white do? I can play b4, and black's got the better position here. Rook e2 is screaming to be played. Yeah. Well, looks like black's okay here. So, but why did white get in this mess? Because he played f4. So let's look back. So my idea of what I was doing, moving the queen and playing bishop e3, or allowing knight e3, just may not be any good for white. Maybe he allowed it with good reason, or prevented it with good reason. But there's other moves here. Rook f2, bishop d4. Where's the king going to go? White's got some problems to deal with here. King f1, king h1. But then the rook just runs over here with a gain of time. And then we run this rook over. Now black's crawling all over b2 and is going to successfully capture it. Yeah, so I guess he was afraid with good reason. after all. But it's an interesting move that he comes up with, a little deflection move. Rook A1 says, if you take my queen, I'll take your queen. If you take my rook, I'll take your rook. So kudos to White for finding this move. But now he's back in this position. There they are, the rook and the bishop. Now they've never moved. Actually, this one moved twice, but when's this guy going to get into play? Okay, so they went about their way this way. And this is interesting. White's now guarding his pawn laterally. And he could be playing, trying for b4 and bishop d2, holding it down. But unfortunately, Black's just got a lot of activity. And I don't know why Black didn't play this check right now. I think that check is trouble for White. Clearly, he has to go to h1, right? And what happens after this check? Okay, where's White going to go? If he takes the knight, he's just dropped the exchange, and I don't think White has any compensation. I must be missing something. Rubo's a good enough player to have seen it and not want to do it. Okay, so what about now in this position? If White goes back, the point is Black goes and collects a pawn, and then decides what to do next. Where does he want his knight to go now? If anything, you could stick it back on f2. Start finding new homes for it. Okay, knight g4 check. Force him back. Now what's White do, or Black do? He can go back to pressuring b3, and he seems to be just fine there. I mean, b2, play rook b, or you can even do this. Hey, what's wrong with this? Well, maybe not. Bishop can take it here. I was trying to undermine the protection of d4, Black should be better here. Probably better to take with the rook rather than run into a potential pin. I don't know, but let's go back to the main line. He played rook b8. It threatens a pawn, so it's good from that respect. And now here I think White just muffed it with king h1. What he needs to play is h3, and I'm not sure if that's enough. Let's double check. Okay, clearly when Black gives the check, White has to go to h1. But there's a difference. When the knight comes to f2, White has this escape square. And now the discoveries and tricks are gone. Now, Black is better here, but a lot of the nice things that he had aren't there anymore. So h3 was the move. Just king h1, he spent 8 minutes on it about. And now, I guess here you still need to play h3, but he didn't. And it's fine to trade then. Now here, what's wrong with knight f2 check again? Same ideas. Knight f2 check. King g1, knight takes e4 check. Maybe I'm missing something, but the video is going on. This is the longest one I've ever made for Team 45. And unfortunately, just look at the Black position. The rook's better. The knight and bishop are better posted. Black's got a great game. He's just dead winning now because now he finds the right time to give the check, and now he picks it up. And White's just losing a piece. And this forces the rook trade. And at this point, Black played one more move, I believe. And one more move. There it is. And then White resigned. Clearly, he's down a piece, and there's no hope here. The a-pawn is going to fall. White can't defend it. If he does, Black trades the bishop off on b5, and the bishop on d4 keeps the b-pawn under control, and the a-pawn just runs. So it wasn't a perfect game, but it's a very interesting game for opening theory. This opening does have merit from either side of the board, but you have to know it. And that's what the whole purpose of me sharing everything I know about chess is, so that you know it, okay? Got because all the all the information I have, I collected in a lot of places, and I just bring it to you all together in my videos. All right, I want to thank you so much for taking this time looking at this. By the way, if you've gotten this far, I want to note that someone else has done a video on this game. We're bringing more people into the league to do these videos. I'm sure he did a great job. I haven't looked yet. I'm not trying. Don't know. He'll get better. I don't know how this will shore up with his. Maybe I'll expose things he didn't, and he'll expose things I didn't show. Chances are that's the truth, that we both muffed up. But that's the purpose. You know, you do analyze bad moves when you're analyzing chess, and the deeper you look, the more you find. And that's the purpose. So I look forward to seeing Truxton's video on this, and I'm certain he looks forward to seeing mine. All right. Once again, thanks so much for your time, and there'll be another video for you soon. Take care.